Horacio Quiroga. The Feather Pillow. A short story about madness, love, and, above all, death. By Fernando Chelle. The text chosen for the literary analysis is by Uruguayan writer Horacio Quiroga, Salto, Uruguay, December 31, 1878, Buenos Aires, Argentina, February 18, 1937. It is a short story titled El Almohadón de Plumas, The Feather Pillow, included in the book Cuentos de Amor, de la Cura y de Muerte, Tales of Love, Madness, and Death, published in Buenos Aires in 1917. The main topic in this story is the unexplainable death of Alicia, the protagonist, victim of a strange animal that lives in her feather pillow. The other two topics seen in the title of the book, love and madness, present in the story, but just in a supporting way. Quiroga chose to structure the action in a similar way as Edgar Allan Poe did in many of his extraordinary tales, in which we can find the so-called effect endings, precisely because of the impression meant to be caused in the reader. As in The Black Cat, to mention just one story by the North American author, in The Feather Pillow, the writer keeps the ace in his sleeve until he reaches the end of the story, in order to surprise the reader. This short story is structured in a classical form, that is, beginning, development and end. The first moment of the story is dedicated to showing the characters and the place where the story is happening, the house. The second moment, the longest one, rolls around the protagonist's newly acquired and unexplainable sickness, and lastly, there is a third moment which focuses on the feather pillow and the strange animal living inside of it, which ends up being the cause of Alicia's death. The story begins with a convincing sentence, loaded with an oxymoronic meaning: her honeymoon was a long cold shudder. As readers, we know that the honeymoon is the period that starts once a wedding is over and goes on for a lapse of time, in which, generally, the just married couple goes on a vacation trip. It is a moment of intimacy distinctive for being a time of intense happiness. When we read the first words of the text, we can already notice the tone of the story. We know nothing about it yet, but one thing is clear: a honeymoon does not have the distinction of being a cold shudder. The omniscient third-person narrative voice keeps defining the graphopoetic, physical characteristics, and etapoetic, character features of the two main characters. About Alicia, we are told that she is blonde, angelical, and shy, while Jordan is described as a tall, silent, and rough man. Quiroga's intention in this first moment of the story is to show the relationship of a couple who love each other, but marked by the lack of communication. We are told that Alicia loves Jordan a lot and that he loves her very much as well, but that Alicia somehow feels scared in front of the rigid presence of her husband. She is not even able to look at him in the eye, and Jordan, in his muteness, is unable to let his feelings known. With the description of the house, the physical place where the events are going to happen, the writer tries, and succeeds, to get the attention of the reader to different interpretations of what will happen to the protagonist. The house is said to be hostile and described as a haunted, cold and abandoned palace which has an influence on the psychological aspect of the protagonist. In the planning of the tale, Quiroga knows beforehand the way and the circumstances in which Alicia is going to die, but he has to create some transitory interpretations for the readers about the facts happening during the reading, so, when the truth about Alicia's sickness comes out and the real cause of her death is revealed, there is a total surprise. In that vein, it's logical to think that Alicia's shudders, that will end up being a strange sickness, are caused by the circumstances around her, like being married to a not very communicative man and living in isolation in that weird house, giving up her sensitive woman's dreams. When the narrator says that, it is not strange that she grew thin, the first reference to a probable illness, we are not surprised, even if at this point, we are too far to know the real cause of it. The illness of the protagonist began as a simple flu, but it becomes bizarre as she is not getting over it, and her health keeps declining. The part in the garden, in which Jordan caresses Alicia's head and she starts crying, is very significant. This is the only moment in the story where Jordan has a love gesture towards his wife, and the emotional distance is broken for a moment. It is understandable that the protagonist starts crying, and her attitude of letting herself be protected. It was the attitude of Jordan what let Alicia show her feelings, which she was holding back because of her husband's character. Jordan's doctor, on his haste to solve this, yet unexplainable situation, gives orders that take Alicia to a vertiginous road to death. When he does not find an explanation for his patient's weakness, his only advice is to rest, and it's precisely resting, lying in bed, that is draining Alicia's life. Of course, we are not suspicious about it, and we even see the doctor's advice as something logical, because he, with his scientific mind, is just trying to ease his patient's pain, even if he does not know the real cause of it. All the pieces of the puzzle fit when the real cause of Alice's illness is revealed, when the strange animal living in the pillow shows up. Only in the last gasp of the story are the loose ends tied, and do we understand the reason for which Alicia's health was getting worse all the time, why the sickness was linked to her blood, she was anemic, and why her life was being drained drop by drop. But as mentioned before, we can see how Quiroga structured the tale in a way in which he plays with our uncertainty and keeps the surprise for the end, achieving his initial purpose. We also find other two significant parts in this second moment of the narration that deserve to be carefully analyzed. First, there's Jordan's attitude towards his agonizing wife, and second, her hallucinations. In different tales, Horacio Quiroga plays with symbolic elements that somehow refer to death, more specifically, to the ceremonies surrounding it. For instance, he does it in his tale A la Deriva, Adrift, in which it is inferred the walls surrounding the Parana River enclose him in a way resembling a funeral. We cannot help but see, in this metaphor, the death of Paulino, a death that soon be well accomplished, but at the moment goes on in his deathbed adrift. In the feather pillow, the funerary ritual that Jordan is living is totally clear, even if Alicia is still alive. The bedroom where Alicia's body is lying, still living, remains silent, and with all its lights on, Jordan visits her and, silently, walks around the room looking at the bed. The second significant part of the story, besides being very well written, is the one referring to the protagonist's hallucinations. This part, besides showing how the situation gets worse because of Alicia's bad weakness, shows the psychological background in the protagonist's mind, which blooms in the form of a hallucination. It is important to take a look into the content of the hallucinations and, most of all, at how Alicia sees Jordan. There is no doubt that the anthropoid staring at her is nobody but Jordan, and we must ask to ourselves why Alicia has this image of her husband. We know that an anthropoid is an animal with a resemblance to a human, for example, a monkey, but it is not a human, in the end. Now let's take a look at Jordan's character, silent, serious, not very communicative. We understand why Alicia sees her husband this way. It seems that in her altered state of consciousness, we see the real image Alicia has of Jordan. This second moment of the internal structure of the story, the longest one, finishes with the narrator summing up some aspects of Alicia's illness, but also incidentally naming the object that will end up being the center of the attention of this story's end, the pillow. The last moment, the story's end, begins with the sentence, Alicia died, eventually. We said before that the pillow is the center of interest of this third moment of the story, and it is, even to the point that Alicia will not be mentioned in the story ever again. The servant appears, another secondary character. We had already met the doctor, and the only objective of it is to have the reader focus in the pillow. As readers, we give a look to that feather pillow, as the servant does, and the first level of attention stops there, on the object hiding the real cause of the tragedy. Then, there is a dialogue between Jordan and the servant in which the only center of attention is the pillow. The first thing that catches the attention of the servant is a pair of blood spots on the pillow. The second thing is the extraordinary weight of the pillow, which they notice when the servant tries to lift the pillow. This whole thing unnerves Jordan, and he strikes the pillow with a single blow of a knife, eager to know the truth about the situation, like the origin of the blood spots and the extraordinary weight. Then, the unexpected situation, the ace under the sleeve. The writer shows the terror hiding beneath the feathers, which appears in the last moment to solve all our doubts. After the description of this strange animal, the narrator gives an explanation about the modus operandi of this creature, how he sucked Alicia's blood and how he had been unnoticed by everyone. Now, with the unexpected appearance of this creature, we tie up all the loose ends of the story and begin to understand each and every pain that Alicia suffered and which ended up killing her. The last paragraph of the story is very intriguing. It does not feel like it is part of the fiction. Instead, it looks more like a scientific explanation about the life and feeding habits of certain parasites that live in birds and sometimes in feather pillows. It seems that Quiroga wants to give a realistic touch to this imaginative display. Maybe he did it to try to impress some incautious readers, to make them wonder if the situation could have really happened and wary about the risks involving owning similar pillows.